So recently I've been seeing all sorts of videos praising Bleach to high heavens and claiming how it is not only misunderstood, but also one of the greatest shonen ever made and the best of the big three. Naturally, most of this could be chalked up to pure hype in anticipation for the anime's return, but prior to 2022 and even 2021, most of the praise I saw for Bleach was mostly Soul Society related, and how that particular arc was not only the best of Bleach, but also one of the best arcs in all of shonen. I have a few videos on my channel where I talk in depth about Bleach from the first episode to the end of the Soul Society arc, but I wanted to talk here a bit more specifically about the Soul Society arc and how awful and fundamentally broken it is. The first episode of the arc begins at 21, but a bit of info and foundation before I actually start. Ichigo and his friends are headed to the Soul Society to save Soul Reaper Rukia Kuchiki from being executed for giving her powers to Ichigo a few months prior. Now, from the moment Rukia was taken to now, the gang has had a little over 2 weeks to prepare, 17 days to be exact. And within that time, Master Urahara, the man who put this whole little plan together, didn't think it necessary to inform the gang about the Dangai train, which immediately shows up to try and kill them, and the Soul Reapers of the Gote 13, where they would actually land, how to proceed to find Rukia, and how they would even get her out of the Serite without being pursued by captains who all have Bankai except for Kenpachi. In fact, Urahara didn't even think to mention what Bankai even is to the gang in the first place, despite the fact that Ichigo can't actually save Rukia without one. Urahara and Yoruichi also failed to mention that amongst the Soul Reapers there were 3 individuals that were, for lack of a better term, traitors. These 3 individuals being Aizen, Kaname, and Gin. They're also the reason Urahara and his friends were all forced to leave the Soul Society and are living in the human world. Now, the most common response I've heard for this information not being given to Ichigo and the gang is because they didn't have enough time to explain all of this and it wasn't important enough for them to know. Obviously, this is ridiculous and makes no sense. This information could very well save their lives and wouldn't take more than a few hours at most to convey to the gang. In fact, at the end of the arc, Ichigo questions Kisuke on why he didn't tell them the truth, and Urahara just laughs it off and has no response. If it was up to me, I wouldn't even have included that scene, because the only reason for this information not being known was to have very nonsensical payoffs and weak shock value disguised as deep and clever writing throughout the arc, Aizen, Kaname, and Gin's reveal being the biggest shock. Now, when the gang finally lands in the Serite, they split up and have to fight their way through to Rukia, and this actually continues for 2 days. And even though Yoruichi can use her spiritual sensory abilities to find and regroup with everyone, she doesn't. In fact, she actually thinks being separated from everyone is for the best. In fact, most of the gang with their own lesser sensory abilities can find and regroup with each other but simply choose not to. And this brings us to one of the most inconsistent aspects of Bleach, being the magic system. You see, Soul Reapers, Quincy's, and Hollows all have a type of sixth sense. It's kind of like the Force from Star Wars. They can use their sensory abilities to sense each other's health bars, power levels, and even location. Each character in Bleach even have their own sort of spiritual strand. For instance, Kenpachi can sense Renji and Ichigo apart from each other, even though Kenpachi and his lieutenant thinks he can't sense spiritual pressure. Now, obviously, not everyone is a master at spiritual sensory, and no character comes outright and says how good they are at it, so it's up to us, the viewer, to decipher through actions and character interactions to get an idea of how well they can sense each other. After all, that's naturally the only thing the viewer can do in a situation like this. But this only makes things worse. At the first captain's meeting, we hear from Mayuri that captains can all sense when an opponent is dead. We know Kenpachi's lieutenant, when in close proximity, can instantly tell that someone is a Ryoka. We know from Ichigo himself that ever since landing in the Serite, he can sense Chad regardless of distance. We already had an idea of how good Uryu's sensory abilities were even before the Soul Society arc, and we know during Ichigo's super secret Bankai training that Renji just casually tracked Ichigo and Yoruichi. Because he wanted to. In fact, characters can kind of just pursue and find each other whenever they want, and causes one to wonder how the hell were Ichigo and the gang not instantly apprehended within the first few hours of them setting foot in the Serite and beating people up. Even though the Gote has an entire ninja assassin division that's all about stealth, capture, and torture. The average Gote member's sensory ability starts seeming like something Urahara should have warned about, or at the very least, something that he should have taken action against, like using some sort of spell to hide and protect the gang from certain Soul Reapers they definitely wouldn't want looking for them, much like how Momo did with Hitsugaya. Since it kind of seems like any captain could easily pursue and find the invaders if they wanted to, but fortunately for Ichigo and the gang, the Soul Reapers are extremely incompetent and foolish. Then there's Aizen. Aizen, everyone's favorite character and the reason most of all this is even happening. So, long ago, Urahara created this thing called the Hogyoku. The Hogyoku, as described by Aizen, is an object that can make a Soul Reaper like a hollow and vice versa, making an individual exponentially more powerful. The significance of this being that despite how powerful a Soul Reaper becomes, there'll come a moment when said Soul Reaper has mastered and maximized all of their abilities and techniques, and his growth will simply stop, for he has reached his limit. And the only way forward is to become like a hollow. Aizen seems to think that he's become that Soul Reaper who's peaked, but still seeks more power, even though with just his Shikai, he seems more powerful than everyone else. Regardless, the only way to get more power is with the Hogyoku, the same Hogyoku that was created and then placed in Rukia by Kisuke. Now, this is another one that had me scouring the internet looking for answers as to why Kisuke, Despite keeping the Hogyoku completely, and I mean completely hidden for over 100 years, chose to put it within Rukia's soul when he knew people would be looking for her after giving her powers to Ichigo. And I couldn't find a single sensible answer online. People either made up some complete nonsense that made the writing look even worse or the characters appear even dumber. I had one individual tell me the reason given in the show was reason enough, even though that didn't make any sense. In episode 61, Aizen claims that when he learned Rukia had disappeared in the world of the living, that he immediately knew Kisuke had something to do with it, because it was Kisuke who made a Giga that couldn't be traced and would eventually turn the user into a human, and so would be the best place to possibly hide the Hogyoku. But why would Aizen assume Kisuke did something so ridiculous? It doesn't make any sense. Why would Kisuke need to hide the Hogyoku within Rukia when he was already doing a swell job at keeping it hidden for over a century prior to Rukia showing up in Katakura Town? Why would Kisuke even need to give her a Giga that would take the rest of her powers when he could simply use a spell to hide her from anyone looking and just keep doing whatever it was he was doing to safeguard the Hogyoku? Why would he at all need to put the Hogyoku in Rukia's soul, and somehow Aizen knows he did just that? On top of all that, as I mentioned, Kisuke knew from the start of the show that people from the Soul Society were going to be looking for Rukia where she went missing and would sentence her to death for giving a human her powers. You might say Kisuke gave Rukia the Gigai anyway because he thought that by the time the Soul Reapers came looking for her, it would have already taken all her powers and she would be untraceable. But this doesn't work, because despite the fact that the Gigai would eventually make her human, she's still going around looking for and fighting hollows with Ichigo. Ichigo, who by the way is fighting these hollows with the bulk of Rukia's power and just letting it leak out of him for everyone to sense. And if you remember, it's because of Ichigo's inexperience with controlling his power that led to Uryu to discover him so easily in the first place. So if anyone wants to come to Katakura Town and search for Rukia and who has her powers, would basically be child's play finding them. Anyway, I didn't want to spend too much time on this. If you want to hear more, check out my 3 Don't Watch Bleach videos and my response to Bleach Hub about said videos. I talk far more in depth there, and even though there are some errors, I think it all came together really well. Bye.